Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Book Club of California's online program, Corita Kent, Art and Soul, the Biography. We are letting in participants from the waiting room right now, and we will be getting started shortly. We appreciate your patience. Thank you.
I like the cock of Corita's head. It's very sweet.
That's a great image to start the presentation with.
I think so too.
Good evening, everyone. If you've just joined us, welcome to the Book Club of California's online program titled Corita Kent, Art and Soul, the Biography. We're going to be getting started in just a minute or so. We're still letting in participants from the waiting room, so please be patient. We'll be getting started in a short. Good evening, everyone. It's a few minutes past 5 o'clock, and I think we'll get started. Participants can still join us in progress, but we don't want to keep you waiting. We have a great program this evening. So good evening, and welcome to the Book Club of California's online program, Corita Kent, Art and Soul, the Biography, a live online presentation by April Damon. My name is Kevin Kosick, and I'm the Executive Director of the Book Club of California, and it's my pleasure to welcome you and host this webinar. We have more than 130 people joining us for this presentation, so for those of you who are new to us, the Book Club of California is a nonprofit, member and donor-supported organization dedicated to preserving and promoting the history of the book and the book arts. Oftentimes, we do this with a focus on the literature and history of California and the West. The book club publishes limited edition books, a scholarly journal, and keepsakes. We host a year-round series of exhibitions and programs like the one this evening on topics including fine printing, design, typography, bookbinding, collecting, history, and much more. If you're not a member, or if your membership has lapsed, and you're interested in what we do, please consider joining our century-long tradition. Membership dues are modest and the benefits are many. We simply cannot do the work that we do without the support of our members. I encourage you to visit our website at bccbooks.org to join or donate to the book club. And now for tonight's program and our presenter, Corita Kent, Art and Soul, the Biography, a live online presentation by April Damon. The daughter of a radio and TV personality father and a showgirl turned politically active mother, April Damon, our speaker this evening, grew up in Hollywood, California. Her degrees, all in French literature, are from UCLA, the University of Rochester, and La Sorbonne. She has written for radio, television, motion pictures, and the stage, while also producing plays in Los Angeles. But the story of her husband's grandfather consumed her for some time, and her first book, titled Exhibitionist, Earl Stendhal, Art Dealer as Impresario, is the culmination of years of immersion in family history, and it's a portrait of one of the most colorful, influential art dealers of the 20th century. Her next book, which is the subject of tonight's talk, was Corita Kent, Art and Soul, the biography. Tonight, April Damon will talk about Corita Kent, one of America's icons, the rebel nun who made a world of difference and, to her surprise, simultaneously made a name for herself. From the day that she joined the Immaculate Heart of Mary order in Hollywood in 1936, Sister Mary Corita's vision expanded as a nun, art instructor, artist, and as an activist for social justice, distinguishing her from the norm of mid-20th century women. Chastity, poverty, and obedience guided Sister Corita, but so did a call to expressing herself in the wide secular world of which she was now a part of. Once independent, Corita Kent shaped a renewed career, forged new relationships, and left in her art and by her example an enduring legacy of hope and love. And that is what you will hear tonight. If you have questions for our presenter, please use the chat or the Q&A function in Zoom. We should have time at the top of the hour to take questions, and we'll curate those from the Q&A. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce April Damon and pass over the controls for tonight's webinar. April, it's all yours.
Thank you, Kevin, and to the Book Club of California. I am a new proud member. I hope others will join if they haven't already. That was a very fine summary of Corita's life. I hope that I can fill in a lot of details for all of us. My publishers are here tonight, Patty Calistro and Scott McCauley of Angel City Press. And thanks to Jim Schneeweiss for being part of this team. I've been looking forward to this for quite a while. Tonight, I'm going to share a story about a revolution of tenderness. It's a phrase I borrowed from Pope Francis on a visit to the US that he made about 5 years ago. And for my purposes, a revolution of tenderness is embodied in the person of artist, teacher, and rebel nun, Sister Corita Kent. My first book, as Kevin mentioned, also published by Angel City Press, was about the early art history of Los Angeles and a singular personality, Earl Stendhal, the exhibitionist, as I called him, an art dealer who introduced modern and pre-Columbian art to the West Coast and beyond. And he was my husband Ron's grandfather. Well, Corita Kent was another remarkable and influential contributor to a maturing Southern California art scene in mid-20th century America. And like Stendhal, her impact has been undervalued, but her talent was too big and bright to be kept under a bushel. And here we are on International Women's Day. Hooray for us. Well, look for another moment at this very formal portrait of Sister Corita from 1960. I like this portrayal better. It's full of color and examples of Sister Corita's art. Young serigrapher artist Ellen Surrey shows us teacher and artist Corita smiling with rosy cheeks, ink all over splattered on her habit as she works her hand press at Los Angeles Immaculate Heart College. Some of you may know about the college. Doing what she loved and was so good at, creating bold, evocative silkscreen prints. And so here's where I want to start. Let me call this part of my talk Stretch the Screen. It's a reference from the biography to the printing process that Corita uses as we prepare together to set the scene for the rest of her life. It begins in Fort Dodge, Iowa in 1918. The year of my mother's birth. Their lives spanned exactly the same number of years, and my mother was a Catholic girl too. Frances Kent is born number 5 out of 6 children into a devout Irish-American Catholic family. And she grows up, though, in Hollywood with hardworking parents. But near poverty and her father's alcoholism are a daily endurance for the family. There are bright spots, even victories. Frances shows artistic promise at an early age, and two of her siblings, a sister Ruth and a brother Mark, enter religious orders. Reception Day into the Immaculate Heart of Mary Order in Hollywood, 1937. 19-year-old postulant Sister Mary Corita, Little Heart, dons her new novice habit as she commits to the IHM sisterhood she has chosen as her religious family for what she expects to be the rest of her life. But stay tuned. She wears the pin of her order. You can see it there right over her heart, the pierced heart of Mary. I wonder if there are any, maybe, Immaculate Heart College alumni with us tonight. I've spoken with many in my research, and here are the now iconic former convent and campus grounds on the corner of Franklin and Western Avenues in Hollywood. American Film Institute now occupies the hill. They've been there a long time. And Immaculate Heart High School still operates on the lower site. Well, this was Corita's home, the place where she lived for 32 years and taught art to an all-female student body for most of that time. This is called The Lord is With Thee from 1952. By 1945, Sister Corita has taught at Indian reservation schools in Canada and in local LA parochial schools, elementary schools. After earning a BA from Immaculate Heart College and a years-long effort to complete her MFA in art history at USC, Corita has joined the IHC art department as an instructor of art, alongside the department's charismatic chair, Sister Magdalene Mary. So they become quite a team in the art department. Maggie, as she is called by her sisters, likes Corita's new limited edition silkscreen prints, a practice that Corita picked up in a class at USC. Sister Maggie enters this piece, unknown to Corita, The Lord is With Thee, in a multimedia exhibition at Los Angeles Museum of History, Science, and Art. And what do you know? Sister Corita wins first prize in the prints division. This dense, richly worked serograph wins other recognition along the way. Now, it may be too soon to pronounce A Star is Born, but evidence mounts that Sister Mary Corita is onto something. Here is Sister Maggie, Magdalene Mary, Corita's mentor, colleague, and friend, but theirs will be a long and complicated relationship until Corita eventually moves into the role of department chair, art department chair at the college. And Maggie leaves for England. And that won't happen until 1964. Well, we can't move on without mentioning these mosaic-covered columns. Art majors at Immaculate Heart in the 1950s and 60s are lucky girls, as are students in the evening extension classes, which include men. The teaching of Sisters Corita and Maggie brings aspects of the wide world to a conservative Catholic student body, as you can imagine, and encourages progressive ideas about creativity. In the IHC art department, a Balinese quote takes hold. "We have no art, we do everything the best we can." The motto resonates against stained glass and in expanded young minds. Madonna, 1956. Corita's early serigraphs are mostly religiously themed and figurative. But from the beginning, her vision is unlike other Catholic art. Does anyone think of Picasso when looking at this mother and child? It is thoroughly modern with decidedly abstract elements. Here is something familiar to most of us, the iconic Eames lounge chair and ottoman from 1956. This exploded view of the assembly diagram features hand-lettered specifications by Sister Corita. Renowned designers Charles and Ray Eames become mentors and friends to Corita and embrace the IH College Art Department as a place of, in their words, unexpected innovation. Sister Corita calls Charles Eames her real teacher. And other luminaries are invited to receptions at the college. Buckminster Fuller, John Cage, Alfred Hitchcock, Ed Ruscha, Anais Nin, Henry Miller, yes, that Henry Miller, they all come to the girls' school at Western and Franklin. So while Sisters Corita and Maggie bring people and elements of secular society into their classrooms, they also explore Los Angeles with their art major girls, all piling into a few cars on Friday afternoons, no seat belts, mind you, and with inexperienced girls behind the wheels, but no disasters ensue on those outings. Well, here is a group from Immaculate Heart visiting the Stendhal Gallery of Fine Art in Hollywood in 1958. The setting is actually my former home where Ron and I lived for more than 40 years. Ron's grandpa, Earl Stendhal, here is showing pre-Columbian sculpture to the girls on their field trip with Sister Corita. I wish Corita were in this photograph. Well, it was kind of thrilling to discover this picture in the Immaculate Heart Art Department archive. I really had no idea that Corita had brought her class to our gallery in Hollywood so many years ago. This is called Be of Love, a Little More Careful, 1959. It's a favorite of mine. The complete quote is from E.E. Cummings. Be of love a little more careful than of anything. But Corita alters his poetry. Her lettering says, be of love a little more careful than of everything. For Corita, love is everything. It is her gift, her theme song, if you will, and it never wavers. Here is Sister Corita with her stylus holding the print that we just saw, Be of Love. 1960, Sister Corita shows an award-winning print, A Sword to Pierce, and declares in a Los Angeles Times caption that she sees herself as, quote, an artist kind of by accident. Turns out, Corita was shy of 3 credits at USC to complete her MFA, and the only class that fit into her teaching schedule was Introduction to Silkscreen. Isn't the world lucky? As the 1950s come to a close, Sisters Corita and Magdalene Mary embark on a European tour that includes Egypt to collect a literal ton of folk art and to bring home some 8,000 photo slides to be used as inspiration in art classes at Immaculate Heart. The nun with the camera is Corita on the right. She was an avid photographer and incorporated innovative photographic techniques to create silkscreen imagery. Well, we began with the phase I called Stretch the Screen. Let's move into the 1960s and 70s, Corita's most prolific and identifiable period as an artist. So from Stretch the Screen, we go to the next step in creating a serigraph, saturate with color. Wonder Bread, upper left, and then Sunkissed, lower right. The Wonder Bread silkscreen is from 1962. As Witness to the Light, actually, is the title of the other one, 1964. For Sister Corita, inspiration is everywhere, and the most fertile field for subject matter is found in her own Los Angeles urban landscape and in the post-war proliferation of ad imagery and slogans, and they were everywhere then, just like they're everywhere now. Corita demands, with a kind of subversive humor, that we rethink our rote responses to General Mills or to a citrus grower's brand. So Wonder Bread establishes Sister Corita's sensibility as a nascent pop artist with a message. Are these dots from a Wonder Bread wrapper merely a pleasingly colorful graphic? No. Corita's dots are communion wafers. A holy sense of wonder takes us beyond consumer manipulation to a spiritual realm available to all, just like her affordable prints. Corita makes this serigraph shortly after viewing Andy Warhol's first solo pop art exhibition of tomato soup cans, we all know them well, at LA Ferris Gallery. Well, why isn't her work held in as high esteem? She will never occupy a stool with the guys at Barney's Beanery, you know, the fraternity of the cool school male artists on Santa Monica Boulevard. These were the male pop stars of the 1960s. And Corita will never see her work fetch $105 million at Sotheby's, as a Warhol did in 2013. And don't forget, Andy Warhol was a devout Catholic with many works representing his beliefs, just like Corita. Still, Corita attracts a wide following for her socio-religious and political statements throughout her career. And look lower right, as witness to the light for John 23 and JFK, two men she admired very much, the Pope and John Kennedy. I Have Loved You, 1963, with color, shapes, and words, because by now, if you didn't know already, text within the artwork was very important to the expression, to Corita's expression. Color, graphic, great graphic interest, and then text as well. And the letters themselves are formal aesthetic elements. Here, Corita invokes the angel of the Lord, Judge Gideon, and God from a play by Patty Chayefsky. The words are hard to read, but the overall message, I have loved you and I shall make you love me, stands out. I have seen this print hanging in several institutions and private homes. It is eloquent and it is apparently a favorite. A school art department catalog cover. Even this practical publication is eye-catching and inventive, designed by Corita, as is everything that comes out of the art department. Sister Corita becomes the de facto face of the department and to some extent of the college. Her students adore her, and many become empowered female artists themselves, having learned from Corita how to undistractedly look at the world and its objects, and then to interpret what they see with their hearts and souls. Let me brief you, I'm going to read a brief excerpt from the book, from the biography. Always, Corita has an eye on the current scene and an ear to society's needs. She pays special attention to the outliers. So, to new movements in art especially, that she might share these with her girls, but also as sources for her own growth. We cannot know if Sister Corita realized she was herself one of the outliers, a rebel in paradise, as one critic called her, a Los Angeles artist who helped redefine the cultural personality of the 1960s. Sister Corita leads an art workshop at the college. Her schedule is exhausting. She teaches, travels, makes prints, mentors other nuns and students. And not helping at all is the fact of her insomnia and bouts of depression. Some crankiness would be justified, but former nuns and students declare that Corita never gave less than her all, warmed usually by a smile. The Juiciest Tomato of All, 1964. It isn't that Sister Corita courts controversy, but it finds her particularly promulgated by Archbishop of the Los Angeles Catholic Diocese, Cardinal James Francis McIntyre, a stunningly conservative authority who wants no part of post-Vatican II modernization of the church or renewal and change within its priesthood and sisterhood. Cardinal McIntyre becomes a relentless nemesis in the life of the progressive, forward-thinking Immaculate Heart nuns in Hollywood. He actually calls them bad women. You know, I imagine Corita, a movie buff, thinking to herself, of all the convents in all the towns in all the world, he walks into mine. And this print, The Juiciest Tomato of All, from 1964, is another example of Corita's melding ad lingo, in this case Del Monte's, with evocative text. The essay is hard to read, but you can read it up close, and it's by Corita's friend, Professor and poet Sam Eisenstein. He's still around. I had a wonderful afternoon with him when I was researching the book. And here he refers to Mary, Mother of God, as a juicy tomato. I can see the Cardinal's heart skip a beat, but wise, brave Sister Corita carries on. She sees no conflict between irony and spirituality. She reveres irreverence, in fact, used creatively and often with humor. Mary's Day at Immaculate Heart College. More fuel, I'm afraid, for the Cardinal's wrath. The annual May Festival honoring the Holy Mother has been a staid and formal religious observance until Sister Corita and her art department take over in 1964. Now it's still religious, but with flowers and laughter and girls in polka dots and parading nuns with guitars and balloons. The new Mary's Day at Immaculate Heart might just be the first happening on the West Coast. And I include on the right, let's see, lower right, a slide of a detail from the Los Angeles Watts Towers, a favorite destination of Sister Corita's, to show the way her environment inspired her. By Mary's Day 1966, many nuns eschew their habits for something less uniform. Andy Warhol's Campbell soup can has nothing on Sister Corita's outfit. There she is with ice cream, second from the right, having fun. Now, do you recognize what this is? Here's a hint. Sister Corita is a Scorpio. In 1965, she trades art for this astrological chart prepared by healer and shaman leader Clear Sky. The middle circle says November 20th, 1918, 7:15 a.m., Fort Dodge, Iowa. Corita's name is in the center, USA, Earth. And note that the name should actually be Francis, Corita's given name. Well, what to make of this? Sister Mary Corita, a woman religious, looks outside of her church for answers to the mysteries that plague her. Pressures from the Catholic male hierarchy, chronic depression, sleepless nights. So I looked up the gospel truth on astrology.com. Here it is. Those born under Scorpio travel in a world that is black and white and have little use for gray. The curiosity of Scorpios is immeasurable. They have a keen sense of intuition, zeroing in on the essential questions and gleaning the secrets that lie within. Well, astrology aside, it does become clear that Corita, although a Catholic nun, is not bound by the tenets of one religion. And she's willing and wanting to glean secrets and to learn from other spiritual practices. She revolts in her way with a personal story animated by an ecumenical faith. Look at this, so impressive. By the end of 67, Sister Corita and the other IHMs, as the Immaculate Heart Sisters are called, have exhausted all arguments and appeals for reform in their long conflict with Cardinal MacIntyre and even with Rome. And so Corita's artwork has drawn much of the negative attention from her diocese. She is considered a ringleader among the so-called rebel nuns of her order. But as such, she makes the cover of Newsweek magazine's Christmas issue in 1967, The Nun Going Modern. The cover of Psychology Today on the left, April 1972 issue, with the theme Religion in the Age of Aquarius. And on the right, many of you would recognize Catholic priest, counterculture peace activist and poet, Father Daniel Berrigan, whose quote appears on the magazine cover. "Don't just do something," Buddha said, "stand there." The calligraphy is by Berrigan's good friend and I believe soulmate, Corita Kent. The orientation is correct. 1965's My People. And this is how we are supposed to view it. Corita gives Berrigan credit for expanding her concept of social and political justice. The sacrifices Daniel and his brother Philip Berrigan make as jailed peace activists influence Corita's own anti-war stance during the Vietnam War. The late 60s reveal a more anti-establishment Corita, a woman of conscience who protests not on a picket line or with civil disobedience, but with color and image and quotes from the Beatles, poets, the Bible, excuse me, philosophers, politicians, even her students. In 1968, Corita makes a life-altering decision. Her art will also undergo profound change. Sister Mary Corita vacates her vows as a woman religious, leaving her church and the only home she has ever known since 1936, to become, at age 50, Corita Kent. She moves to Boston to begin a new independent life. Corita returns twice a year to visit her Corita Prince Art Gallery on Vineland Avenue in North Hollywood, where her sister, Mary Downey, oversees the business while Corita lives in Boston. And I really like this picture of the exterior wall and was lucky to come across it in a private collection in Tucson. Before using the image in the book, Angel City Press and I determined that the graffiti in the heart is not something unprintable. Look at this, groovy Corita outside her gallery in a Marimekko print miniskirt. And this is just 1 year after leaving Los Angeles. Commercial and public commissions come Corita's way in Boston. Perhaps some of you have driven past this Boston landmark on the Southeast Expressway, as I have, the Boston Gas Company's giant storage tank with Corita's signature rainbow swash. It was painted in 1971, and Corita's long ago intent was meant as a beacon of hope for the masses. Today, LGBTQ pride comes to mind, and I imagine Corita would embrace contemporary symbolism. This tank is among the largest copyrighted works of art in the world. Corita was criticized for some, even Daniel Berrigan, by accepting corporate commissions for a Group W Westinghouse magazine ad campaign. But she never submitted a design for a page whose quote she could not personally endorse. On the left, a quote by Benjamin Disraeli, "From the people and for the people, all springs and all must exist." And Samuel Johnson's quote reads, "The future is purchased by the present." Our serigraph is almost complete. With the final stroke of Corita's squeegee, we now spread the love. People ask me if Corita, an icon of love, ever married or wanted to marry. On her own at age 50, she did want to find a husband, but it seems that the men she was drawn to were priests. Here is Cardinal Humberto Medeiros, a Portuguese priest who is not yet cardinal, when he and Corita form a relationship in Boston. And a source whom I trust told me that Corita loved Bert very much. I tell what I know of their story in Corita Kent, Art and Soul, the biography. In the year before she dies, in 1986, Corita finds the strength to support causes she believes in, like this one, Women United for AIDS Research and Care, at the American Repertory Theater in Cambridge, Massachusetts. On her right is Kathleen Franklin, and on her left, singer Judy Collins. Corita looks happy there. One of her last commissions, the Love Stamp, issued by the US Postal Service in 1985, proves to be one of the most popular ever sold, some 700 million stamps. Isn't that something? I'm so pleased to have a couple of sheets of these to save. I added this slide this week. Corita lives bravely for 12 years with more than one cancer. And I suggest in my biography a link between her illnesses and the toxic chemicals used in her printmaking process. Here is her former art studio across from the college. It's been a dry cleaners for years, where she turned out hundreds of prints over the course of her Immaculate Heart career. The modest little building has just been approved for Los Angeles Historic Cultural Monument status. And few women associated with Los Angeles buildings have been so honored. Corita dies at age 67, so young, in Boston, having been producing prints and later lovely watercolors all along. And as she requests, her ashes are scattered here in her Sister Mary's Rose Garden in North Hollywood, California. I found my way to the house where Mary and her husband Frank lived, even having been given the wrong address. Maybe I was divinely guided. I was welcomed by the owner, an actor, who opened his door to a stranger, offered me tea, and had no idea that his garden was the final resting place of an important woman, an artist, a teacher, an activist, and an advocate for hope, Corita Kent. Thank you.
Wow, April, I'm back. That was so fascinating. I tell you, I knew very little about Corita Kent before this evening, and now I want to know so much more. I totally need to get this book because I'm so interested in her incredible life. And what a terrific talk for International Women's Day. Like this was a great timing thing that happened here. I mean, this was really kind of inspiring and uplifting in so many ways. Really, really a joy to hear about, an icon, as we both talked about, an icon, the rebel nun icon, with this bold personality and the use of bold colors. And I think we have some great questions in our Q&A, and I have a bunch of questions too that I want to ask. And the first one I always like to ask is about kind of your research process. You have used so many great photos and of course all the great art that was included, but I mean, the groovy Corita picture and the soup can outfit picture, like how did you get access to all this great material?
Well, access wasn't easy. The Immaculate Heart community didn't see me immediately as the ideal person to write this biography, even though no one else had ever written such a detailed work on their beloved Sister Corita. And yet I was able to find in the Immaculate Heart archive these wonderful photographs. The artwork, though, I had to go to the University of Georgia that had an archive of all 700 of her prints. And those are the ones I ended up using in the book and for this slide presentation. So the answer, Kevin, is that information is out there, but it had never been gathered together to make this kind of a story and to really cover her whole inspiring life.
Oh, that's incredible. 700 prints. Is that the number that is her body of work is considered?
Pretty much, yes.
Yeah.
UCLA Hammer has a set, and then the Immaculate Heart community owns the prints as well.
So you know, you said that the silk screens were clearly limited edition. Do you know what kind of print runs that she did?
That's a good question. Some were 100, 150, some were 300. It was so important to Corita that her artwork was affordable. Even now, if you go to corita.org, you can see and buy copies of pretty much everything that she did. And the prices are still reasonable all these years later.
Yeah, that was another question that was sent to me. If someone was interested in collecting her work, what are some of the ways someone would go about doing that? There's online searches. Corita.org.
For sale. And I'm on that website often.
Great. So now let's get to some of these other questions here. I'm scrolling back up. There is a great question about did Corita enjoy music that would seem to accompany her artwork in the 60s? You know, the music, the whole art scene. I think the question's about the whole art scene in the 60s, and did it affect her work, and was she involved in it? Did she listen to Bob Dylan and Joan Baez?
This way, John Cage, I mean, what a personality.
Yeah.
Talk about an outlier. She personally invited him to meet her students at Immaculate Heart College, and he came. And she quoted the Beatles, and she quoted many musicians and songwriters right there in text on her silkscreen prints. So I would say she was very much a part of everything that was happening in the 1960s and was inspired by the various movements. The war, the Vietnam War, was negative in terms of influencing her. She was sad when she documented her feelings about the war, but music and rebel kids in colleges and on the campuses, that was inspiring.
Yeah, that was such an interesting list of people that she invited to the school. John Cage, said Hitchcock, Henry Miller. Did she create any kind of collaborations with these folks afterwards? Did she work with them?
No, I mean, not that I know of.
Yeah.
I think she encouraged them to come back again and maybe do some seminars with the girls. She was such a humble person. I suppose you'd expect that from a nun, but she wanted her students to have access to everything and everyone, all the experiences possible. But in terms of her artwork, she was the painter, the watercolorist, and the serigrapher.
Yeah, it wasn't about her. It wasn't about her making these connections. It was about bringing it back to the school and imparting it to the students there. Let's see, there's a question here about someone remembers Corita's prints from the McGovern campaign, and did she make work for other politicians?
Gosh, should I know that? If I were a politician, I would go right to her door and ask her to do that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, she was clearly, you mentioned the socio-religious political statements that she made in her work. So it's possible that she did do some stuff for other folks. I'm going to pull up Did Sister Corita, do you know if she worked with Sister Karen Bocalero? I don't know if
Yes,
she did.
she did, at Self-Help Graphics in East Los Angeles.
Right.
Another interesting woman that someone should write about. Corita and Karen knew each other well. And early on, Corita wanted to see East Los Angeles and the Latinx community get their say. They were artists, they were writers. And so Self-Help Graphics turned out some very important and beautiful early silk screens. And there were collaborations between them.
Let's see, what has happened? This question says, what has happened to the pop art saints and columns that stood at IH? Are they not there?
The ones that I showed,
Mm-hmm.
are they still there? The ones covered with mosaics, is that what you're talking about?
I think that's the ones, yeah.
I'm going to say they're still there. I've been on the campus many times, the high school campus now, the college is gone, AFI has taken over, but the Corita Art Center, I should mention that. Corita Art Center is a place on the campus that you can make an appointment, go to the high school and go and see prints in person and buy prints and other things there in a little gift shop at the Corita Art Center. So that's a place to explore here in Los Angeles. But iconic images like that Corita and Magdalene Mary were involved with, I would say they are still on the campus.
So you mentioned she had an interesting relationship with Maggie, right? Like, and then eventually Maggie left for England. Is there a story in the book about that? Do we need to buy the book to?
A little bit. Maggie saw Corita's star rise fast, and yet Maggie had been her mentor, kind of taught her a lot. And then Corita takes over even the chairmanship of the art department. Yeah. So there was, I won't say jealousy exactly, but Maggie felt a little bit on the periphery once Corita's popularity grew. And Maggie was just ready to leave and go somewhere else.
And that's super interesting how the mentor and the mentee, and then that relationship changes. And you also mentioned that Corita was a mentor herself to a lot of the students. Are there any successful artists that she mentored that we might know about?
I mean, like, to give you a name, I interviewed many women who have careers in art, and they're very accomplished. I can't right now think of someone who Corita taught, but they're out there. They really are.
They must be, yeah.
And you know what's going to happen. After our time together tonight, I'm going to go with a glass of wine, and all the specific answers to these questions are just going to fill my head, but I'm doing my best.
Well, these are just general questions. People, that are curious about all kinds of things. You also mentioned that you did tons of interviews from students, from can you tell us a little bit about how that worked? Are there any interviews that really stood out as revealing in terms of researching Corita?
Well, keep in mind, her students who were so influenced by her were 16-year-olds, 17. They were young in the 60s. Well, now they're kind of my age or even a little younger. And so they're still around. And they have a fierce loyalty to Immaculate Heart College. Their reunions are events, and they all have kept in touch with each other. The pandas, the Immaculate Heart High Pandas. I don't know what the mascot, if there was one for the college, but Immaculate Heart is a wonderful sorority of women. And so I found my way to many of them, and they found their way to me. When there was a little bit of a conflict, we've heard author April Damon isn't getting complete cooperation from the Immaculate Heart community, and she's trying to gather art, and she's trying to gather information. So many of these women got in touch with me and said, I want to help you. I have some pictures. I kept a journal. I knew Corita personally. Corita confided in me about her inability to sleep at night. And these were very personal stories.
Interesting. Yeah, you also mentioned that she suffered from depression, which was So I'm sure there's a little bit about that in the book as
A
well.
lot.
And
A
yeah.
lot, because we know so much more now than
Mm,
we did then. So
yeah.
I speak about that quite a bit in the book.
Yeah. You mentioned there's a couple of places that are part of her story, and I think some of the attendees are like, what's the connection? Like, why Georgia? Like, why does Georgia have a full archive? And why did she move to Boston? Right?
All right. She had some family in Boston. The
Mm,
East Coast had always appealed to her. She traveled there often. I don't know if I mentioned, she was on the road all the time. She was teaching, mentoring, painting,
yeah.
silk screening, but she traveled to take pictures. You saw her on a camel in Egypt. And so she spent a lot of time on the coast, even when she was living all those years in Hollywood.
Okay.
And so Georgia, University of Georgia, has an important library archive. I can't think of what the library is called right now, but when I was looking for artwork of Corita's, not knowing exactly what I would have permission to reproduce in the book,
Mm,
and I found my way on the web to the University of Georgia. The Hargret Library is called. They had a whole set of Corita's art, going way back. And I might have known at the time, I don't recall right now exactly why someone in that library was so interested in Corita, but it was a labor of love gathering up all the examples of her work.
yeah. Oh, that must have been.
What a help. Angel City Press and I celebrated that night.
Yeah, that's a big win to get
It
all
was
of
a
that.
big win.
Yeah, that European tour and Egypt thing. That's so interesting. Is there any detail in the book about how that happened? How two nuns from Southern California ended up
Something
in Egypt?
interesting as a result of that. Oh, Corita she was kind of running the show after a while.
Mm,
Once she was art department chair, I don't know where the budget came from. Well, yes, I do. The Catholic Church.
yeah.
Catholic Church financed the travel. But something interesting, I mentioned they brought back a ton of folk art, and it was actually more than 2,000 pounds.
Wow.
And this was an extraordinary, exquisite collection of just all these objects made of wood and metal and paintings and eccentric kind of things, sculptures from everywhere she traveled. And this was all at Immaculate Heart College in like storerooms. And she used these pieces, she would bring them out for lessons for her students, talking about them, photographing them, using them as subjects in her works and in the students' works. And then years later, there was an auction. And I know Corita had intended for this collection to stay together, but you know how things go. Years go by. Catholic Church perhaps isn't supporting the college in the way they used to. The college, in fact, is going away, and there will only be a high school. And most of the folk art was sold off. It wasn't kept together as a collection. And, I am an art historian, and I come from 100 years of the Stendhal Gallery. And I know what it means to try to keep works together that have importance and that relate to each other. So individuals have wonderful things in their homes all over the world now.
Yeah.
That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, that's the upside, right? So there's a question about in your research, did you come across or use any primary sources like diaries or letters that she wrote, or were you able to access or find that kind of stuff?
Yes. I traveled quite a bit too. No church paying for my travel, but thank you for the advance, Angel City Press. I went east and I spent some time at Radcliffe in their library. And there's a women's museum in Washington, D.C., the Museum of Women's Art.
Mm-hmm.
And I found things. I found letters that Corita both received and sent. Anais Nin was engaged in some correspondence with her. And so that was a very valuable time that I spent in that library. And everything was beautifully organized. I had to wear my white gloves. So yes, rich source material, photographs, letters, even some journals. And I'm grateful that I had access to those things.
So and there's a kind of a specific question here. I don't know if you're going to know the details about the way she created her art, and specifically how she made the screens for silk screening, especially using calligraphy. Do you know much about what her process was?
Sure, and as I alluded to, she even included a very interesting and intricate photographic process to make some of her flat works look like they were waving with like wrinkles and waves. It's hard to describe, but I talk about it and show an illustration of it in the book. She was innovative, and anyone can Google how to make a silk screen, and there's a hand press involved. And remember that picture I showed you early? Let me see if I can just quickly, well, maybe not. The very fun, colorful picture.
Yeah, and you can even go back to that very first one as well, if we want to end at that.
But I don't want to scroll through all of it. Let me try this.
Yeah, maybe, that's perfect. Yeah. There was a request to end with the great portrait at the beginning as well. That one's perfect too. So
I will go back up to the portrait. We're almost done, I guess. So it's a hand press. It involves strength, upper body strength. And Corita was 5 feet 1 inches tall. And so some of what her students were able to do for her was take over, pushing and pulling the squeegee over the paper. And it's not a complicated process, but it's a specific way. And so I really would encourage anybody listening tonight who wants to know more about it, just go look it up. In 3 or 4 stages, you'll see exactly how she turned out those beautiful.
Is there a catalog of all of Corita's work that's out there? Has anyone done that?
Well, there was a beautiful book published a few years ago. I know this book so well. It's a title from one of her prints. It starts with somewhere. Someone want to help me with this? Patty, you know the title. Anyway, there's a beautiful book that has almost every print that she ever did in it. And Somewhere Is Now, maybe, Somewhere Is Now, from a show up at a college in the East. And it was a traveling show. It was the first comprehensive traveling show of her work. And I would almost call that book a catalog. Somewhere Is Now. And I should say there have been some traveling shows of Corita's work in the last 6, 7 years. And I've gone to a few of them. We had one in Pasadena, a beautiful show at the Pasadena Museum of California Art. So once in a while, you actually have an opportunity to go and see the works on the walls.
Our good friend Tom Ingalls says it's Someday Is Now is the title.
And what did I say? I think I said Somewhere Is Now.
Yeah, you were close. You got the some and now in there.
I knew someone would help us out with it.
and they did. We are almost at the top of the hour. So let's go back to that first portrait slide and keep that up as we kind of close out here. If we can get that back up, that's a beautiful way to end this terrific presentation. And you can just do from the beginning if you hit this in the.
Let me do that because we have extraneous stuff on this.
Oh yeah, there we go. Hit that. There we go. How beautiful. I did put up in the chat for anybody who is interested the links to both of April's books. They are up in the chat and you can click through there. They're also going to be included in the email that we'll send out to everyone tomorrow, kind of summarizing and thanking you for coming to tonight's wonderful presentation. And April, I'm going to be sending you some of these great comments and questions that are in the chat in the Q&A so you can look at them. But I'm going to read one before we close out here. And it says, I still remember the thrill of first driving by the gas storage tank in Boston on the way to the airport. As a young art student, I was thrilled to see something so graphic, so beautiful, so inspiring in a commercial setting. My parents thought it was dreadful, which made me love it even more. And I think that is the perfect way to end such a terrific presentation about, again, someone such a bold personality, bold art. I really need to know the story about how she got to do the love stamp. There has to be a story on how that came to be, and I'm hoping it's in the book. But I'll find out when I get a copy of it.
Thank you. I so appreciate you all being here tonight.
So I want to thank you, April. This was terrific. I had a great time. I learned so much, and I owe it all to you and to Corita Kent. So thank you. And I want to thank everyone for attending this Book Club of California program tonight. Please join us for our next online program, Arequipa Sanatorium, Life in California's Lung Resort for Women, next Monday, March 15th, from 5 to 6:15 p.m. here on Zoom. This is going to be a live online presentation by Lynn Downey. She's an author, archivist, and historian. You can register for this event online at bccbooks.org/programs or using the link in the weekly programs emails that you may be receiving from the Book Club of California. Be of love, as we heard tonight from Corita Kent, is the parting thought for the day. Just think about that, be of love. Thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful evening. Be well and take care. See you
Bye.
soon. Bye, everyone.